If you're with us, we've been following through the book of Matthew in a series we are calling Revolution, looking at what Jesus brought and changed when he came on the earth. And today I want to start with this question for you to think about. What comes to mind when you think about greatness? Like the word greatness. Who comes to mind? What comes to mind? In the chat, you could drop that out. Drop like that information. What is it that you think about greatness in your mind? Because usually what we think about, we go to, or I go to, is like the biggest, like the best, right? The pinnacle, the highest quality, some of those kinds of things. So we think of like, what is the greatest like generation? Which is the greatest generation? And we all know the answer is millennials, right? It's just we have to get the other generations to believe it first, right? So what's the greatest movie of all time? What's the greatest country on earth? What's the greatest song? And we know the greatest song could not be country, right? We all know that's true. Who's the greatest? Think about this. Who's the greatest? Today, we're going to see the Pro Bowl later today, and that's like the greatest NFL players of all, of the year. They're all going to play today. Who's the greatest rapper? Who's the greatest person? Who's the greatest musician? And there's even like a whole company called Guinness that set itself aside to like measure greatness, the greatest things in the world. Here's a couple that I love. The largest pizza ever, the greatest pizza ever, was 1,261.65 square meters, which is, for those of you who know the meter system, it sounds really big to you. For those of us who don't, I don't know how big that is. But it was also gluten-free, which means it probably didn't taste the greatest, right? And then the tallest man ever was 8 feet, 11.1 inches. We know the highest, the greatest mountain is Mount Everest at 29,028 feet and 9 inches. That 9 inches counts, right? And then the richest person, like the greatest wealth on the earth, is they're competing right now. It's either Jeff Bezos or it's Elon Musk at like around $190.5 billion, which is more money than I know all of us can conceive of in our entire lives. But this is how we measure greatness as human beings. We think about these kinds of things. Who has the most? What is the greatest? Who is the highest achieving? Who's the most recognized? And what if our measures of greatness as human beings were wrong? What if we measured everything incorrectly? What if how we measure greatness is not how God measures greatness, is not how we should think about greatness? And in Matthew chapter 18, which is where we're going to go today, Jesus redefines greatness under his revolution and shows us what true greatness really is. See, we've been walking through the New Testament this year. We're going to walk through the entire New Testament together as a church this year, and that's why we're in Matthew right now. And this last week, through reading Matthew, Jesus gave us these definitions of greatness, and I'm going to break with my normal kind of mode. I know you guys are starting to figure it out right now, so I want to keep you on your toes. Like usually I read the scriptures, and then I tell you a story, and then I give you like the point, but I'm just going to give you the point right now. You guys ready? All right, the point is this. True greatness does not come from position. It comes from submission. This is what Jesus is going to teach us today. And I know you probably don't believe it yet, so this is what we're going to unpack. True greatness in Jesus' eyes, in Jesus' kingdom, it doesn't come from position. It comes from submission. And let's look at this first story. There's two different stories we'll look at today that redefine greatness. The first is in Matthew 18, and let's start there. It says, at that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me." And so if you want to be great, what Jesus is saying is be like a child. There's your first thing. If you want to be great, be like a child. Now, this context, Jesus is approached by his disciples, and his disciples ask this question. They want Jesus to settle a debate for them, and what they're really debating is, who is the top disciple? This is really their question. When they ask, who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, they're really saying, like, can you rank us in hierarchy? Is Peter the man? Like, is Peter at the top? Like, is it Bartholomew? Like, probably not Bartholomew. We don't know much about him, but who's the top dog? Like, who's the man? Who's the greatest disciple? And Jesus doesn't answer their question. Jesus does something incredibly different, actually. He redefines the term greatness. And what he does, we kind of is lost on us because we love children. Like, our culture values children. We love children. You know, we take all the care and precaution in the world to care for our kids who are here at church. And we love our kids. But back in Jesus' day, they were not valued like they are today. And so when Jesus pulls over this little child, a small child, to use as an illustration, it's shocking for the disciples. It doesn't make sense. These children had no status, and they were not valued in Jesus' day. Children, if you understand the context, infant and child mortality rates were really high in Jesus' day. So you have a baby, like, they just didn't have the medical capacity that we have today, and so to have a baby didn't like guarantee that that child would grow to full age. So there's all kinds of infant and child mortality that's really high at that point. And until they could contribute to the household economically, they were actually considered a burden on the household. This is why bar mitzvah, you celebrate in Jewish culture the fact that this child can now contribute to the family rather than just consume from the family. This is why this is such a big deal. And they have no authority. Children do not have authority over anyone else. They have no authority over others. In fact, they are completely dependent on others. This is the way that Jesus' culture looked at children. And by Jesus bringing this child, it really redefines for the disciples what they should be thinking about. And Jesus tells them they need to change. He says, what you need to do is change and become like this child. Become like this little child. Take the lowly position of a child, and then you will actually be great. Now, how does that work? It doesn't make any sense. How in the world could that be possible? And what Jesus is really getting at the heart of it is this, is that their concern for status is not compatible with God's concerns. That the concern for status, the desire for status, is incompatible with being a disciple of Jesus. That they have to change their mindset, that pride and discipleship, they are antonyms. Now, all of us who are Christ followers in this place, we have all stepped into being a disciple of Jesus. We are disciples that make disciples. That's our role and our responsibility, every one of us. Now, pride and discipleship, they cannot coexist. They are antonyms. They are oil and water. They force each other out. And this is what Jesus is trying to get them to understand. You have to eradicate this desire for a powerful position. You have to eradicate the desire to be seen by others. You have to eradicate this proud arrogance that is coming up inside of us and accept the dependent position of a child. Now, that takes a ton of humility. Of course, it takes a ton of humility, and this is what Jesus is trying to get them to understand. And then Jesus takes it even further, takes it one step further, and he associates himself with a child. In that last verse, he says, and whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. He is identifying himself as a child as well. That Jesus is identified with the lowly position, not the position of authority, not the high status, but the low position, that he is the servant king. And if you want to serve him, you have to do what he did as well. And this is our takeaway first. See, true greatness, I said, does not come from position, but from submission. And the first place we have to submit is to God. What this is about is how we relate to God. First and foremost, how do we relate to God? So if you want to really become great, then you have to remain totally dependent on God, like a child is totally dependent on their parents. This is the takeaway for us. You have got to remain dependent. You have got to remain totally, utterly like in this place where you trust Jesus and Jesus alone, and you don't grow into independence. You live in complete dependence on him. That just like children are totally dependent on their parents, disciples are totally dependent on Jesus. Now, as many of you know, tax season is beginning. Right? It's like our favorite time of the year. It's tax season. Come on, everyone who loves tax season. Okay, yeah, there's maybe a couple people here who I know make a lot of money during tax season. They like it. But tax season is like this stressful event, right? Stressful. And I saw this, I saw this awesome, I think, descriptor, which I want to show you, which I think articulates why it's so stressful. The government says this: you owe us money. It's called taxes. Me, how much do I owe? The government says, you have to figure that out. Me, I just pay what I want. Government, oh no, we know exactly how much you owe, but you have to guess that number too. Me, what if I get it wrong? The government, you go to prison. Like, that is what tax season feels like, right? For sure. And now I know one of our board members is a tax pro, and she's probably going to correct me on all that stuff, but this is how it feels, right? This is how it feels. It's like, if I get this wrong, like there's so much at risk here. This is a problem. It's such a challenge. But those of you with children, you get to claim your kids as dependents, right? When we had kids, we learned this little bonus called dependence. It's wonderful. It gives you a little tax break, right? And basically what it is since you provide for all of your kids, like clothing and meals and shelter, you provide for everything for your kids, that you get a little bit of a tax break because your kids do not contribute to your household. They consume from your household. And those of you who have teenagers, they consume a lot from your household, right? Like they are consumers because they are totally dependent on you. You get to claim them as a dependent, as a parent. Now, the same is true of us in our dependence on Jesus. We have to remain in that place where we understand and recognize we actually live in complete dependence on him. That Jesus is not dependent on us. Some of us, I think, have got this wrong. We think Jesus is like, hey, man, I need you. I just need you so much to do this for me. Jesus is anxious. No. Jesus is not dependent on us. We are dependent on Jesus. This is the right posture. This is the place that there are no self-made men or women in Jesus' kingdom. This is what we celebrate. Our culture loves that, right? We love the self-made man, the self-made millionaire, the self-made billionaire, the Jeff Bezos and the Elon Musks of the world. We want to be like that. We aspire to that kind of greatness. But it takes some deep humility to run this counterculture kind of way. It takes humility to accept the position of a child because all of us, we have this natural tendency towards pride. We have a natural tendency to want to desire fame and fortune and success and power. You know, there's this new job that exists today called YouTuber. Did you know, you could just make a job of being on YouTube full time, right? It's crazy. You just want to be seen, want to be recognized. There's so many people trying to make it by making a name for themselves. And that is what our culture celebrates. They celebrate those people. We envy those people. We want houses like they have. We want the stuff they won't have. We want the success that they have. But there are no self-made men or women in Jesus' kingdom. And that desire, that envy has no place in discipleship. That envy, that desire to become greater must be eradicated if we're actually going to follow Jesus. Because what we have to recognize, fundamentally recognize, is that no matter how much we have, we still depend on Jesus. We still are dependent on him. We have to recognize that no matter how high we climb the ladder, we still need him. We still need him. That whether you are the CEO of the company or you're at the entry-level position, you still need him. That whether you are wealthy or you are struggling, you're poor, you still need Jesus. That whether or not you are at the highest rung of society or you're at the lowest rung of society, you need Jesus equally, just as much. The danger is when we acquire wealth and acquire position and acquire fame and acquire these things, we start to become self-dependent instead of God-dependent. And this is to eradicate that for us, to realize, actually, you're still just as dependent on Jesus as anyone else. So greatness starts with dependence. Greatness begins here. But the disciples, they don't get it. Right? I love the disciples. They give us hope because they don't get it. And like a lot of us, we don't get it all the time. They don't get it. And later in Matthew chapter 20, another argument breaks out. And we'll go to that. Matthew chapter 20. This is the second story. So the first is showing us that we have to remain dependent on God. And the second one shows us another kind of dependence and submission. Now, to set this up, Matthew chapter 20, we'll start in verse 24. There's mama bear situation going on here. So mama bear, mom of John and James, comes to Jesus and is like, I need to secure a position of fame and a position with you in your kingdom for my kids, right? So they show up, Jesus has this conversation with them. This is actually in today's reading of the New Testament. And Jesus basically tells them I can't give you that. That's not mine to give. It's the Father's to give that kind of authority. And then the 10 other disciples hear about it, and let's pick up the story. When the 10 heard this, they were indignant with the two brothers. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." So first he's told us, be like a child. And now what he says is be like a servant. So the first is how we relate to God, and the second is how we relate to other people. How do we interact with other people in the world? And again, another argument about greatness breaks out. And again, Mama Bear shows up. She's trying to secure power for her sons, and the disciples get angry. Why do the disciples get angry? Because they want those positions for themselves. They're cheating the system. They threw mom at Jesus to try to get it. Like, you know how it is, right? Like if you need something, you're a kid, and like you can't get it done, but you throw mom at the situation, she can usually get it done. Right? Like she can make it happen. She can take care of stuff. They want that power too. They are indignant with the other disciples because it's like they're trying to steal the high seats of honor. So there's competition here, and competition so often exposes pride. Competition is so often reveals the pride that is inside of us. When you get competitive, when you need to beat somebody else, when you need to take their position, you need to like win, it reveals a lot of pride inside of us. And this is what we see in the disciples. It actually exposes that they are still proud. They still don't understand what Jesus is saying. They are still concerned with getting the highest status possible in Jesus' kingdom. They don't get it. And that's why Jesus calls all of them together. He doesn't just correct James and John. He calls them all together because every one of them still has this misunderstanding about what true greatness is. And so Jesus contrasts two kinds of different kingdoms, like Jesus' kingdom, and then he calls the Gentile kingdom, the rulers of the Gentiles. So think of it like God's people and the godless people. This is what he's really kind of describing. And really what it is like the natural human inclination, what we would naturally do left to our own devices versus Jesus' new order, Jesus' new kingdom, what Jesus has changed. And so the rulers of the Gentile, the godless people, they lord it over them. They exercise authority over them. These are the terms that he uses to describe. It's like this. They tax the people. At some points of the kingdom in Jesus' day, taxes were up to 90% of your income. The government just basically took everything that they could from you. They ransacked your home. The Roman government especially was oppressive to people like the Jews. So they just taxed and taxed and taxed, took everything that you had, left you with very little. They also had the right to draft you into the military to make you fight their battles. They had the right to draft you into their service in the courts to force you to become a servant in with them. So they lord it over them. And the rulers of the Gentiles, the Roman Caesars and Augustuses, these people, they love to have statues made of them. They love to have parades that celebrate them. They name cities after themselves, all these kinds of things. They love the position of authority. It's very authoritarian. It's very ego-driven. It's very proud. And thank God it doesn't sound anything like our society today. Oh, wait, yeah. Actually, it's quite describing our culture today, is it not? It's the same thing is true. We still love those things. We still love those places, but Jesus says some powerful words, not so with you. This is not compatible with being a disciple. Instead, act like a servant or slave even. Now, there's two interesting words. Servant is this Greek word diakonos. Diakonos, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but that's basically how it goes. What it means is a waiter. It's a servant in a restaurant. The diakonos is the server in a restaurant. They do things for others rather than doing things for themselves. And this is where we get the modern term deacon, where we have a deacon board. It comes from this term, diakonos. The deacons are the servants of the church. They are the ones who serve rather than be served. So the deacon board is not a position of power. It is a position of service. The church does not serve the deacons serve the church. This is how it's supposed to work. This is this position of service. So you could be like a diakonos, a server, or you could be like a slave, doulos. Doulos is this Greek term, slave. And what it means is you're bound to serve someone else. Where in the case of like a server in a restaurant, you're kind of a free person. You're choosing to make that service. You're choosing that job. But a slave doesn't have a choice in the matter. A slave is forced to obey their master. They don't have a choice. They can't do what they want to do. They have to do what the master asks them to do. And these are terms that Jesus calls great. These are the radical terms that like Jesus is like, you want to be great? Be a servant, be a slave. That's what greatness looks like in Jesus' kingdom. Jesus' disciples are part of this new and upside down kingdom. Everything is different. It is not the way that humans order things. And again, Jesus is the supreme example of this. Jesus throws it out there himself. In that final verse, he says, just as the Son of Man, which is how Jesus often refers to himself, the Son of Man. He says, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now, if anybody had the right to high status, if anybody had the right to authority, if anyone had the right for honor and for the glory, then it was Jesus. But Jesus didn't choose that path. Jesus didn't come as a conquering king. He came as a suffering servant. He has authority. He had authority. He is God incarnate. He is all-powerful. He is all-knowing. He is God himself who's taken on flesh and come to the earth. And how did he use that authority? He uses that authority sacrificially, not to be served, but to serve others, not to get what he wants, but to give. And he went so far as to sacrifice his very life for us. Later, the Apostle Paul writes this in Philippians 2, chapters 6 through 8. He says this about Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. This is the Lord that we follow. This is the one that we are in discipleship under. This is the one whose example we try to live out every single day. If Jesus came and laid his authority down, then we do the same because we are his followers. True greatness does not come from position, but submission. We submit ourselves to God, but then we also submit ourselves to others. Submit ourselves to other people. This goes against every kind of natural inclination that we have as human beings. I get it. It is so countercultural. It is so counter your internal narrative. I know there's probably people in this room who are like, I don't want to do that. Like, this is not naturally what we would desire. This is not normal. We want power. We want authority. We want recognition. We want perks. We want to be at the top of the org chart. We want these things. We desire these things, but these desires do not honor Jesus. They honor our own sense of pride. When you reach those pinnacles, those places, you just want more power. You just want to make more of a name for yourself. If you really want greatness in Jesus' kingdom, you have to become a servant. Now, human society needs properly structured and ordered like government. It needs properly structured authority. That's not wrong. And this isn't what Jesus is saying. Jesus isn't saying that you shouldn't have an org chart. You shouldn't have, like we at the church have an org chart. And I mean, I'm the one talking to you, sit pretty high in that org chart. I sit underneath the deacons in submission to them, but we have an org chart, right? It exists because properly structured authority makes sense. God shows us that over and over in the scriptures. But the problem is not that society is organized. The problem is how we use the authority once it's been organized. The problem, and then what Jesus is trying to get at, is what do we do with the authority that has been given to us? Some of you in this room, you have authority over others. You who are parents, you moms and dads, you have authority over your children. It should be that way. Your children should not run your household. It won't go well for any of you, right? Like some of you are in authority over others. You manage other people, and it wouldn't make sense for them to run those things. You need to run those things. But how you use your authority to serve those people is what makes all the difference in the world. How you use that authority is what matters. You can either use your authority to benefit yourself at the expense of others, or you can do what Jesus said and use your authority to benefit others at the expense of yourself. This is what Jesus is describing. We use our authority not to seek more power and more recognition, but to seek to serve others. That's why I believe that servant leadership is the only model that is acceptable in Jesus' kingdom. It is the only model that is acceptable inside the church. Servant leadership itself is, interestingly, on the rise in culture. There's this increasing study around leadership. I'm like this leadership, a little bit of a leadership geek, kind of study it, love this stuff. But in the 1970s, early 60s, kind of around there, this new idea came out. And it was called servant leadership. This guy named Greenfield, he came out with all this study about servant leadership. And he made this argument that what we should do as leaders is seek to serve other people. And everyone's going, this is crazy. No one's ever heard of this. And it's actually growing in traction. More people like this idea. But it's not a new idea. It didn't come from Greenfield. It came from Jesus 2,000 years before this guy ever was born. Jesus is the one who gave us this model. It's not a new idea. It's Jesus' idea that we are servants who lead, not leaders who serve. There's a big difference. We are servants first, and when Jesus allows us to lead, then we use that to serve others as well. We are not leaders who go like, oh, well, I guess I should show up and serve every once in a while to just make the case. And the difference is in your motivation. The difference is in what motivates you to do what you should do. We aren't selfishly pursuing our own gain, but we are selflessly helping other people. That is the heart of the servant kind of leadership. Some questions to ask yourself if you're actually leading like this in your home, in your school, in your company, wherever it might be, is this. Do you expect others to serve you, or do you expect that you're supposed to serve others? Do you expect other people are going to do things for you, or are you doing things for others as well? So first question, that is that. Second is this, do you see people as a means to an end, or do you see people as God's children who he loves? Do you see people as like a resource to manage, or as human beings to actually care for and value? That goes down to your motivation. Another question asks, do the people you lead become better? Do they become healthier? Do they become better at their job? Do your children become better? Do your home become better? Does your school become better? Do those people actually grow? And the last question to ask is this, do the people that you lead, are they more likely to become a servant leader themselves? These are the kind of things that we can ask ourselves to find out if we are leading like Jesus has showed us how to lead, because selfish ambition has no place in discipleship of Jesus, that if you are too good to serve, that you are not good enough to lead in Jesus' kingdom. If you can't serve, if you can't take the position, a low position, if you can't accept a position of service, then you are not good enough to lead, because greatness, it requires humility. It requires this dependence. It requires this submission to other people. So true greatness, as we've said, it doesn't come from position. This is the way the world thinks. The greatness is your position. Greatness is measured by how many other people recognize you. But what Jesus says is so different. So different. It comes from submission. It comes from us recognizing that we have to live in submission to God. We choose to submit ourselves to other people, just like Jesus did. That means deepening your dependence on him. That means eradicating pride in your life. Now, if you don't want to do that, I have good news for you. Jesus will do that for you. Actually, it's bad news. Jesus will do it for you. And if you choose the path of pride, Jesus has an incredible way of knocking you down off of that pride, that you can either humble yourself or Jesus will make sure that you get humbled. And how do I know that? Because I've walked through that painful experience myself. Anyone else in the house? You walk through that. You're like, I want the pride thing. I'm doing the pride, whatever. But it is way more painful when Jesus forces you to become humble. If you choose humility, it's a whole lot easier. I'll tell you, it's a whole lot easier. At a previous church that I worked at, I was just a staff pastor, just one of the few, guys and girls who were just helping the church function and do its thing. And I was given this assignment. And my assignment was pressure wash the church and all the sidewalks. And it was this deep, do you not realize, I can preach, I can lead worship, I can do all these other things. I'm going to pressure wash sidewalks? Anybody could do that. I didn't go to Bible college to pressure wash sidewalks, right? And so what did I do? I did what we do in church. If you haven't been around church very long, you may not realize this, but all of us kind of know what we should say. And so when he said that, when my pastor goes, hey, here's what I need you to do. The summer project that I'm giving you is pressure washing. In my mind, I went, you don't realize the greatness that you're staring at and how much you're wasting this potential that is in front of you. But what came out of my mouth was, I just love to serve whatever you want. Absolutely. Right? We're all good at that in church world. We all figure that out. We're like, I really don't want to, but like, I know what I'm supposed to say is like, yeah, I'm your servant, just whatever. So I did it, of course. I did it begrudgingly. I got out there and, had dirty, gross days, pressure washing stuff and making that happen. And the whole time, man, it's like a prayer and like a battle and like a fight with Jesus the whole time. I'm like, Jesus, and what I'm trying to do is if you pray like me, this is what happens. You try to get Jesus on your side. Anyone else try to do that? Jesus, do you realize what's happened? Did you see the injustice that I'm suffering? Jesus, correct this. Correct my pastor in Jesus' name. He doesn't see it. I know he doesn't see it, right? I guess this is just me. It's okay. It's just me, right? You just try to get Jesus on your side to correct the situation for you. And I just keep having this like fight and this fight and this fight. And finally, I felt like this was what Jesus spoke to me after doing this job and trying to do it well and, trying to do it the best of my abilities, all those kinds of things, trying to push down my pride and all these things. And it was like Jesus said this to me. If this is what I need you to do, are you willing to do it? Or do you only serve me on your own terms? Ooh, that one hurt. And that was like the painful eradication of pride in my life. Will you only serve me on your own terms when it's good for you? Or are you willing to serve me whatever I ask you to do? And that's been the change in my posture ever since. Now, I wish I could say that I never have pride, but I'm a human being just like all the rest of you. We all have struggled with this. We all wrestle through this. We all have to choose to become a servant. We choose these moments, but I just resolved like my default position is servant. My default position is to say, yes, Jesus, whatever you ask me to do, that is what I will do. Whatever you need me to do, that is what I do. I do not serve you on my terms. I serve you on your terms, Jesus. You are Lord. I am not. I am not the one in charge here. You are. I am dependent on you. Whatever you ask me to do, I will do it because I'm dependent on him and I am a servant of others. Now, I'd ask you the same question today. Are you only willing to serve Jesus on your terms? Or are you willing to serve him whatever he asks you to do? Whatever he asks of you. That your default position is yes. Jesus, whatever you ask, the answer is yes. That's the position of humility. That's the position of true greatness in Jesus' kingdom. That is how we run counterculture from this world. And I guarantee you this, you will stand out in your company. You will stand out in your community. You will stand out in your home if you operate like this. Because people don't operate like this. They burn each other. We use each other to get to the next rung. There's a vicious cycle. We want more promotion. We want more power. We want these other things. We'll do whatever we can do to receive it. But if you become like this person, man, people will gravitate towards you. They will flock to you because they realize you don't want something from them. You actually want something for them. And what a witness to the world around us if we live counterculture to our society. And so just like Jesus said at the beginning, he says, you need a change. You need a change. I think we need a change. We need a change. We need to exchange. Not how independent we are. We need to redefine greatness. We redefine greatness as disciples of Jesus. It's not how independent I am. It's how dependent I am on him. That really makes a difference. It's not how much I gain. It's how much I give that makes a difference. It's not how successful I am. It's how obedient I am to him that really matters. It's not how high I climb the ladder. It's how much I help others climb the ladder who can't on their own. It's not about me and how powerful I am. It's about how submitted I am to Jesus and how much I can serve the world. I'd love for you to be known like this and in your individual life, for us all to be known like this as a church community as well. That we choose to take the low position, that there is no job that is too low for us. We scrub any toilet, clean any floor, do the dirty. It doesn't matter because we're just serving Jesus, and whatever we do for him is wonderful. It's great. As a church, let's be known for this, that is the way of Jesus. That is the way to transform our society. It is not by trying to get higher. It is by choosing the path that is lower and deeper submission. So all across this place, I think we could all be moved and have a response of our own in this place. But before we step into a time of prayer, I want you to contemplate and ask yourself, are you pursuing Jesus' definition of greatness? Or are you pursuing someone else's or your own definition of greatness? And let's all decide today to choose Jesus and his definition of what it means to be truly, truly great. Dependence and submission. Let's pray today, church. Father, we look to you. Jesus, we look to you because you are the example. You are the ultimate example. You had every right to authority. You had every right to high status and position and power, and you laid it all down, and you did it for me. You did it for us. We did it for every person who's hearing my voice right now. You did it so that you could save the world, that God, you love the world so much that you sent your Son so that everyone who believes in him won't perish but will have eternal life, and you accomplish that by sacrificing yourself for sinners like me. Jesus, thank you for the gift that you've given me. Thank you for calling me into discipleship and to serve you. Help me to eradicate pride in my life. Help us to eradicate the pride that so easily comes in our lives. And Jesus, to choose your definition of greatness instead. Jesus, I pray over people right now. I just feel in my heart, my spirit, there are people who are heavy burdened. They are heavy laden. They have felt like they need to do this life on their own. They've felt like they need to rise to the occasion of homeschooling kids or working from home, whatever it is. And Jesus, our dependence on you reminds us that you can carry that weight for us. So Jesus, our first act of dependence is to throw those burdens onto you, to stop trying to rule the world and to let you be the ruler of our world. Jesus, we submit to you as ruler and as Lord. And Jesus, we submit to others as servants and as slaves willingly and voluntarily. Jesus, help us to transform society. Help us to see a shift in our city, to see a change in our homes, to see a change in our companies and culture and country. Jesus, as we choose to become servants, as we choose the humble path of suffering servant rather than conquering king. Jesus, help us to reach the lost, to reach more, to reach out, and to show this example of love to others. God, not to worry about what we can get, but to worry about what we can give. So Jesus, we choose you. We choose your example, and we choose your definition of greatness. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.